So I can imagine. So Prague was Prague bombed during World War II, or no? Because it wasn't.
Yeah. So basically, like bombed by air raids, yes, 3 times, but not in this area.
Was it the Soviets trying to get the Nazis out, or?
No, it was the Americans
Really?
bombing the factories in the outskirts.
Oh, that the Nazis were using to
basically.
reduce.
And then there was one accidental bombing, which I'm planning to talk about later because
Okay.
it will actually be in the site where it happened.
Okay.
And then the first bombing was just like actually one plane and one bomb, or like a couple of bombs but one plane, which they dropped in one power plant in Prague 7. But that was about it, really. And other than that, we did have also. So you see this is the town hall of the old town. You see that building over there? So that is basically where that whole building is missing. Like you can see. I'm gonna have to find it. I'm so sorry.
That's what I was gonna say. Is a lot of this rebuilt, or did it just get spared? It's like we went to Berlin, and there's nothing from 40s Berlin still in Berlin.
So like most of the buildings you see here, they are original. Like they're not like they were not destroyed. Like obviously some of them are damaged, especially by like tanks and bullets. But for example, this is the picture of that building that you see over there.
Oh wow!
So that was fully destroyed because that was during the uprising. The building is not there now, as you can see. There's basically like a park, and that like brown building that you see there. You can even see how the windows kind of want to continue, but they don't. So this was one of the main like fighting zones during the Prague Uprising, because that was the town hall of the city. So it was symbolically one of the heads of the uprising, symbolically. Actually, if they would get the town hall, it wouldn't really stop the uprising, because what mattered the most for the uprising was the radio station, which we actually during Second World War, this was the only uprising where the radio was playing continuously throughout the whole uprising. Wow. Nazis had a big problem with that because it was playing right above their heads, and it was literally giving orders to everybody where they need to go, which street they need to arrive from, and Nazis didn't know what they are saying because it's in Czech, right? So for them it was important to take down the radio, but they actually never did throughout the whole uprising. Like looking at it fairly, they did have upper hand during the uprising towards the end. So if theoretically we wouldn't have this pressure from the Red Army coming like from the east, who knows how it would end? It could have been much worse. But in the end, the fact that the Red Army was so close is what eventually pushed the Nazis out of the city and basically ended the uprising. Like that. So some buildings here were destroyed, like this building, this very pretty building that you see here, had to be completely rebuilt after the Second World War. That's, by the way, St. Wenceslas, again, our main patron saint. He's usually depicted with a sword pointing down because that means peace, right? So, and the white horse as well. But anyway, so this building had to be fully reconstructed because it was like it caught on fire. And the corner building, the white building behind the statue over there also. But other than that, like most buildings in the city survived. So like it was the biggest damage we actually got in the Second World War building-wise was because of the tactical bombing. That was a mistake that we're going to talk about later.
What was the population of Prague like that was in here? I mean, you had 40,000 troops.
Yeah, Prague was smaller. Like we had, like I can tell you how many people joined the fight, which from the civilians was about 100,000 people, and about 30,000 armed members of resistance/police. We even had actually in the fight other nationalities, not just Czechs. Like for example, in this building was fighting a member of a Belgian resistance, because some people who got like arrested were put in the camps and then they escaped from there. And they just joined the resistance here. So they were like, yeah, I'm gonna help you, let's do it. So crazy. It was people, even some Austrians and even some Germans were actually fighting on the side of the resistance here. As just like whatever, if they had a common cause, they would join the fight.
What were the casualties on the resistance?
The casualties of the resistance, well, as I said, about 7,000. So that was on the Czech side. On the German side, it was like close to 2,000. It was a little bit less because they obviously were fighting that's how it goes in a war, you know. Like you put more experienced men against like people who never held
trained, equipped,
exactly. And they basically were dropping like flies, you know. Like people didn't know how to behave, and like we know that, for example, on the corner of that building where the Starbucks is, there was 3 people standing chatting during this whole, during the uprising. They were just like chatting there, and some guy even told them like, get out of here, you're like, you know, it's dangerous. And a few minutes later, a grenade fell there, and they all died, you know. So. Like it's this is how the victims were just like piling up because people had no clue what they were doing, you know.
Right.
We can go over there actually to that building.
It's actually not bad out here now.
I think there's a lot of history that hasn't been told, like how.
Of course, yeah.
How how the Nazis really treated people, because there's you never see like stuff about they had all these Jews, right?
Yeah.
And they had control of them. They had all these women. What did they do? You know what I mean? I don't think that history is there. There's no rape really in World War II. There's not much history there.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of stuff is there that we just don't know about.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And it's always like when you look at some of the photographs from like that's always what fascinated me, looking at like old photographs that come from like archives, because even we have a lot of photographs of the city during the Second World War. And you can see a lot of the times, you know, people obviously just live their lives, you know. So, like, I watched this photo of one of the bombings of Prague, the Valentine's Day bombing. Actually, the one afterwards, which was intentional, done by the American army in March 1945, when they like bombed the factories in the outskirts. And they have like this picture of the factories on fire in the back, and in the front just a bunch of people with their hands in the pockets going home chatting and laughing, you know.
Oh.
And I'm like, wait, this
doesn't make sense.
This makes no like this. I always imagined like Second World War fights, everybody's like screaming in fear and all that. But like I guess people, it's like, you know, it's like now when you look at Ukraine, and sometimes you watch the footage from there, and you just see people driving to stores, behind them rockets fire. And it's like. This is like the other aspect of war, how people just like try to live their life despite all this danger, and it's crazy. You know?
Yeah. So they're adaptable.
Yeah. It's I don't know. Like I've never experienced this knock, and I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't either. But my parents have. My dad lost like half his family in the bombing in Monte Cassino during all of that.
You're familiar with Monte, the taking of Monte Cassino?
So,
he lived in Cassino at the bottom.
And so his family was. So my parents really were affected by the war, you know, but not us. We don't.
Yeah.
Well, my grandfather, for example, he was like a pretty hardcore guy because he's still alive. So he was just another rate tense, I guess. But he was actually one of his first memories comes from a concentration camp. You know. Yeah. So it's like he remembers how they had to how they had to wash dishes to get more food as children. They were like 5 years old back then, and but interestingly, he was the reason why he was in a concentration camp is because after Second World War ended, all the Germans that were here were exiled, and some for like about a year-long period were locked up in camps as a punishment for what they did to the Czechs and the Jews, basically. And my great-grandfather was a German living in Czechoslovakia, and so my grandfather, 5-year-old kid, was actually locked up by the Czechs in the camp, you know, as a punishment, as a revenge.
Revenge. Yeah.
But they were allowed to stay here, which was very unusual. Only those who usually were able to prove that they were somehow good or they.
No, they're a little. China has a lot of people. Oh, stepping stones.
Or
stumbling stones.
So you know them?
Yes.
We've seen them other places.
So this is something that I like to also talk about because it's a very interesting. I don't know if you know who, like the backstory behind them.
Gunper.
Yeah, this is where the people live.
The artist. I don't know. I never met him, but.
No, you know the name. Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I know the
name. He was his name, like I guess in German it would be like Günther Demnig or something like that. He was from he was based in Cologne as an artist, but he for the first time created these in Berlin, because, well, the idea behind it, and that's like from his portfolio, how he like writes it. He says that he felt personally responsible for the deaths of the millions of people that were murdered by the Nazis in the Second World War.
Oh, because
He's German, which I would actually like to get back to because there's like an interesting thing. Or we can do it now. Do you know Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl.
I've heard the name.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
was he a Nazi? Or?
No, he was no, but there was another Nazi
Okay.
called Frankl. But Viktor Frankl, it was a very common German name, so that's why it's like you can hear it many times. But Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychologist who ended up in a concentration camp during Second World War, and he wrote. So somebody's my phone is violently vibrating. Nothing serious. Okay, good. So Viktor Frankl was imprisoned in a camp. He in fact went there voluntarily because he had a chance to escape, but he decided as a psychologist that he felt obligation to help in the camps. So he basically, even though he had a chance to escape, stayed and wrote a book, a very interesting book, which is called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very tiny book like this. It's an easy read. You can buy it next to Charles Bridge, and it's like a train ride read. And he describes like Holocaust in a way that I've never like seen before, because he shows it from the perspective of somebody who was in the camp, but not like talking all about this terrible stuff that happened, but he talks about the psychology of people that were there. So he like describes what the people are thinking, how they were like feeling the things, and also he was basically saying like he could even say like who will survive and who won't based off what they were doing. And, like if he saw a guy who exchanged food for a cigarette, then he was like he's done. And basically, yeah, and like a lot of really surprising things I learned in that book. For example, even when people are like digging train tracks in the middle of winter barefoot, he said that they were joking around. They were like singing. They were like actually in the worst time you can possibly imagine. People are still trying to throw jokes around, you know, and that